We are recording this evening's session. Hello, everyone. If you like to now be on screen, you can stop your video. I'm hoping you won't. Welcome to the Needham Connects book club discussion on Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And as we start tonight, just wanted to remind us of why we're here. This book group started about, I'm going to say, at least 4 or 5 years ago as a collaboration between the Needham Human Rights Committee, the Needham Diversity Initiative, and the library, the Needham Library. And it's been a wonderful gathering of minds and hearts, discussing many different books, different lived experiences of folks who live in Needham, or folks who may relate to folks who live in Needham who may relate to the stories. And we've had wonderful authors also visit us. And tonight's discussion, we are going to focus on a New York Times bestseller and MacArthur Grant Genius. So we're in for a treat. But as we get started, I would like to bring your attention to one of some bit of sad news. You may have heard that our co-chair, the co-chair of this book group, Rick Hardy, passed away unexpectedly on March 8th. And I want to share a little bit about Rick. Rick was instrumental to keep this book group going. Just want to share a little bit about Rick as we remember him tonight, especially. He was elected to the Board of Trustees of the library in 2011, and he really embraced his role with passion. He served as trustee chair for the 2019 period. He was also involved in the Library Foundation of Needham, and he participated in many book club sessions. As a matter of fact, I met him through a book group discussion when we were doing it in person, and that's how we connected. Rick also participated, was instrumental in getting the strategic plan for the library, the 5-year strategic plan for the library off the ground and engaging the community. And he was part of the team that collected 800 responses from the Needham community, which gave birth to the 5-year strategic plan. Rick will be missed by many from the people in Needham and outside of Needham. He was an avid cyclist, and he also practiced Buddhism, and he will be remembered by many of us. So I'll ask you for a minute of silence in memory of Rick Hardy. Thank you. And thank you, Rick. Now we are going to, I'm actually going to introduce you to Julie Reich, which, Reich or Reich, Julie?
It's Reich.
Reich, thank you.
Yeah.
Who is a member of the book club committee and who is going to be tonight's moderator. Julie?
Hi, everybody. I'm a Needham resident. I've lived here for 20 years. And I have a connection to writing. I'm a writer myself. I focus on children's books, but I have lots of experience reading novels for adults and being involved in book groups. So I was happy to volunteer to lead this discussion. And yep, that's it about me.
Great, thank you. So we're ready to get started with the discussion. You want to tee us up to the video?
Well, thank you. That was
Can I just say we're a small group. Can I just jump in? Thank you for showing that clip. And I have no idea what he said to his mother, but it moved me to tears. And I'm really appreciative that you showed the clip because I found this to be the saddest book I've ever read. Heartbreakingly sad. And even the picture of him and the book jacket was so sad. So I have too much sadness in my life right now. I almost didn't read the book. I almost said, I can't do this. So not that everything has to have a happy ending or be uplifting, but I do feel a little uplifted seeing him smile and speak in that way. So thank you.
Do we want to just briefly introduce ourselves? Since we are such a small group, it would be nice to at least just know each other's names. Is that okay with everybody? So I don't know if anyone came late, but I'm Julie Reich. I'm going to be facilitating the discussion, and I live in Needham.
Thanks for that, Julie. And yes, there are a couple of people, and you can pass if you're just listening, that's okay. Anna Geraldo-Kerr, I'm hosting this on behalf of the Needham Free Public Library. Great to see some familiar faces and some new names. Welcome. Cece, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, Cece Ganacanto, and I live in Needham. And thank you very much for bringing this book. And Anna, thank you for convincing me to read it. And I actually read it from cover to cover and finished it 10 minutes before. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Happy
Hey, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm KK Hill. I'm on the Board of Library Trustees with Anna. And I also was thrilled to read. I just finished it, and it was since I spent 10 years living in Hartford as a young person.
Oh,
So
okay.
Marlene?
I'm Marlene Schultz, and I live in Needham, and I appreciate this group so much because I read books I would never pick up or know about on my own. So this was really very interesting. I'm also in the Needham Human Rights Committee, and we're one of the co-sponsors of this group.
Thank you. Alyssa?
Hi, Alyssa Arano, also Needham, member of the Needham Diversity Initiative. And I agree with Marlene. I echo that sentiment that I read books that I might never have known about or thought to pick up. And it's really nice to have a space to come and talk about it. And I'm sure there'll be different perspectives than mine, but I already shared some of my perspective on the book. So.
Thank you. Lee?
The
You muted.
Thank you. So I'm Lee Betcher. I've lived in Needham for about 20 years. I'm happy to be here. I really made an effort. I'm recovering from surgery, but I have a magazine of diverse voices, Solstice, a magazine of diverse voices, which is a national magazine, but it's based here in Needham, which people don't know about. So it's been 15 years promoting international and national voices of diverse writers in fiction, poetry, and nonfiction. I'm not here to hype the magazine, but it can show you why I'm here to participate in this book talk. Thank you.
Lee, did you say you're the editor of the magazine?
I'm the founding editor-in-chief.
Oh,
Yes.
great. Yeah, I've seen the magazine.
Okay.
Great to know.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Jocelyn? You come. Hi.
Oh, hi. I don't have any special connection to anything. I didn't even know there was a book discussion group. I just stumbled across it when looking at the newsletter. And I read this book maybe about a year ago, and it really was very moving. It was a profoundly emotional read.
Yeah,
So
I would agree with that.
Thank you. And,
Thank you.
And under Needham Library, we have Gay Allen, who is our tech wizard. And you want to say hello?
Ladies, nice having you with us this evening, and thank you all for participating.
Great, thank you. Back to you, Julie.
Thanks for introducing yourselves. I always like to know everybody I'm talking to. I thought I'd kick things off with a quote from the book. So let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see? Some people say history moves. Can you see that? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to read it. I'm not the best reader, but bear with me. Some people say history moves in a spiral, not the line we have come to expect. We travel through time in a circular trajectory, our distance increasing from an epicenter only to return again one circle removed. Lan, through her stories, was also traveling in a spiral. As I listened, there would be moments when the story would change. Not much, just a minuscule detail. Shifts in the narrative would occur. The past never a fixed and dormant landscape, but one that is re-seen. Whether we want to or not, we are traveling in a spiral. We are creating something new from what is gone. The reason I chose this quote was I felt that it embodied how the book is written. So it's not only about the content of the book, but it's also the form of the book.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you noticed that it's not a linear story. There's lots of flashbacks coming around, and I didn't even see them as flashbacks necessarily. It's just moving through time. I suppose technically that's what a flashback is, but it felt a lot more fluid than that. So I just wanted to get people's take on this and, share your thoughts and what you think about that.
Well, I think it's a quintessential insight into the book. It's a book by a poet who's writing a novel, and he's working in fragments, and he's playing with time. He doesn't have a consistent plot, so it's not a page turner, as we would say in the fiction world, but it has its compulsion through language and through the circularity. So I think that you're absolutely right to focus on this, because it is one of the book's strengths, and it's prose poetry in a way, but it's not a novel with a consistent plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thank you for that quote, because having just put the book down, a few minutes before, and I'm sorry for being late, but I'm having connection problems. But I think that's a really interesting and insightful way to frame the book, that he keeps revisiting moments from his past and not in a chronological order, but more wrapping around themes that he's writing about. That's helpful to me in terms of how to think about the book.
I love what he says here, that it's not a dormant landscape, but one that is re-seen. That I don't think anybody is really an kind of accurate narrator of their own life, or anybody's, right? I don't think we're reliable in that way. And it's just interesting how stories change. I think Lan's story changed a bit, depending on the circumstance and the retelling.
Yeah.
So
And
I'm really glad.
Go ahead, Cece.
Sorry, so I'm really glad that we're doing this, because I was reading it really quickly. I just started to read it late last night and then a few hours this afternoon, and I was getting really confused between the prose and the poetry and the circuit. It was like so many flashbacks, flash forwards, but when I read this quote, it just makes so much sense. And especially the part that we're traveling in a spiral and we're creating something new from what is gone. And I think that's just that as we relive certain moments and think back on them, right, we're trying to bring back something that has long gone, but we're trying to find some fresh perspective or some memory rekindling. I really fell in love with this book. I did an excerpt. I was like, oh, am I going to go? Am I not going to go? And then I got the, like a short preview of it, and I just fell in love with it, and I said, oh my God, I think I have to really read this whole book. I can't just do the excerpt. So thank you.
Yeah. What I told people, I tried to get some of my friends to come, but they didn't. Oh, well, but anyway, I told them that you don't even have to have read the novel or the whole thing in order to discuss it, because there are no spoilers really. It's not like plot dependent. It's not plot driven at all. It's all about the language. And so that's what I most appreciated about it. And Alyssa, I agree with you that it was sad, but at the same time, the way he frames the story, like he starts out as an adult, like, he's telling this from an adult perspective, like it let me know, okay, he's okay. Like he makes it out of this situation. And the fact that he's able to tell the story gives me hope. So, but like you do feel, every time he circles back, you feel that grief again, but also his resilience.
One of the things that I thought about when I was reading this was that he was writing it to his mother, who was never going to be able to read it. So I thought that it was really a catharsis for him to write this book. I don't know if other people saw it that way, but that was really one of the takeaways from it that I had.
So
I have a feeling, I say similar feeling. It's and now knowing from the video also that he wrote the novel in the closet. It's almost like he had a cocoon. I kept thinking, when I heard that in the video, I kept thinking of him as being almost like a caterpillar, in a cocoon, kind of going through that chrysalis, process to become a butterfly. And it's just like he had to kind of come to there's a rawness in what he's describing. And maybe he felt free because his mom wasn't going to read it unless it translated it in Vietnamese. I don't know. I mean, she can read that, right? So
yeah.
So anyway, but it did. There's so many pieces that make that process of writing the story so meaningful. It just maybe those pieces needed to be there for the story to come out the way it came out.
I think it's interesting that someone mentioned you could come in and out of it at almost any point. Again, that's that braided quality. I have a friend who's a poet who braids her poetry. So she'll come back around to things, certain themes. She'll start on one theme, braid it back to another theme, which is what he does, right? And so it's really written more like a long prose poem, in my opinion. It's a coming of age story, but it's a coming of age story that goes way beyond our country. It goes into immigration and politics, of course, but it is a coming of age story, but it's told in this poetic way. And so that someone said they loved it. And I wondered, when you said you loved it, I wondered why you loved it. I don't know who said that. I mean, I can see loving it. I'm not saying I don't love it, but I just wondered why.
Oh, so I think that might have been me. I think I fell in love with it because I loved the language that he used to describe certain things. So here's like one piece on page 12, it says, "You once told me that the human eye is God's loneliest creation, how so much of the world passes through the pupil and still it holds nothing. The eye alone in its socket doesn't even know there's another one just like it an inch away, just as hungry as empty. Opening the front door to the first snowfall of my life, you whispered, look."
Oh, it's fabulous. Yeah.
Right. So there's just this, it was just like, the language was just, I don't know, it just really grasped me. And so as I read through it, I highlighted different portions that just made me think about things in a way that I had never thought about them before.
Yeah, I think that his it was a real exploration trying to search for what is the definition of art and what is the definition of beauty, and that he was working, there were a lot of painful stories that he had to tell, both his own and his mother's and grandmother's, but that he was kind of, in the process of turning it into art, he's really kind of finding a lot of joy in using beautiful language so I felt the sadness, but I also felt a lot of joy and creativity kind of jumping off the pages.
Yeah, agree.
Another one that I loved is when he talked about the monarch butterflies, and he talked about, so on page 12 also, it says, monarchs that survive in migration pass this message down to their children. The memory of family members lost from the initial winter was woven into their genes. And it's probably something maybe cultural, the ancestor worship and the connection to your family and your heritage, right? And that even though you have never met and your ancestors, that you carry a part of them in your genes and in your lifeblood, and how you should live your life to honor them. I mean, there was just something really powerful about that spoke at least to my lived experience.
I think it's so true. And I only, maybe other people knew this already, but I only in the last couple of years learned that it's not the monarchs who return north aren't the same monarchs who went south, which is even more astounding, that they know, like the babies, the offspring know to come back north. So that's like exactly what you're saying, Cece. There's something sort of written in our DNA that, tells us this is part of our heritage.
I think it's also referencing what they call maybe inherited trauma, given what the history of what happened in Vietnam and their own migration as refugees to this country. If you've read any books about the history of Vietnam, or any other books that tell the immigrants' experience, it's very, I don't know. I don't want to say it's very compelling, but there's also a lot about inherited trauma, which you may or may not be familiar with as a concept, where trauma gets passed down from generation to generation, even for those who haven't personally experienced the trauma of war or immigration, or people talk about this in reference to the Holocaust or things like that, that it gets passed down even to people who don't have personal experience with it, much like he's talking about with the monarchs. And so I think there's a definite reference to the Vietnamese experience as well here.
Yeah. Welcome, Tom. You're on mute.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah, I forgot to register and I didn't get it. Thanks to Gay Ellen, I did. So thank you.
Great. Well, we've just been talking for a little while. I shared a quote. The gist of it was that that life is not linear; it's circular, and that's how the book is written, in a circular manner. And so now we're sort of veering off from that, and so you're welcome to jump in anytime you want. Okay, so I read an interview, and so as I was reading, I took a lot of notes, and I was writing down all the themes that I came across, and I listed probably 20 of them. And then I read this interview with him, or not an interview, it was a review of the book. And so let me see. Okay, so the book reviewer wrote, "It is easy to imagine a bad version of this novel in which any one of its preoccupations might have overgrown to capsize it. It might have been the opioid novel, or the Vietnam novel, or the exploitative world of the nail salon novel. It might have been the gay adolescent love novel, or the violent childhood novel, all themes that are touched upon lightly while still assuming a fully weighted presence in the narrative. So I completely agree with that. I felt like, yeah, there were a lot of themes, but like this person says, like, I think focusing on any one of them too much would have just been like, felt really not over the top, but just too weighty in a way. Just wanted to get other people's thoughts on that. Or maybe some themes that you noticed or focused on.
He definitely jumped in and out of a lot of different themes, you know, and in a short book, and you know that could potentially be a criticism, but because I think of the sort of poetic nature of the language, touching fleetingly and then circling back later to the same themes, you know, it was very evocative that way.
For me, it made sense. I am glad that he touched on the many dimensions of who his world was. There was a part of him who's, you know, his mom worked in a nail salon. So it made sense to bring that into the conversation. Then he was learning about, you know, how he was developing as a kid, as an adolescent. So they're all parts of who he was. So, you know, it will be so easy to just write he could have, and given the way that he thinks, or at least from, you know, the little bit we saw in the video and in the book, it seems like he is a deep thinker, and that multi-layer intersectional identity that he has, he's very aware of it, and he wanted to share all of it in the book, you know, so I couldn't see him going on one route. It wouldn't be him.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that coming back to ancestors, he really did continually go back to the Vietnam and what we did to Vietnam, that we dropped more bombs on Vietnam than we did in World War II, that Vietnam's only the size of the state of California, and the lasting results of our attacks on Vietnam into his grandmother and grandparents, and then his mother, and how that carried through into her being in this nail salon where people were, you know, getting ill and cancer and so forth. So I felt there was this necessary dark thread carrying through his family, so that he did continually come back to and show the results of his family's life as a result.
I think Marlene made the comment that it felt like this was probably cathartic for him. Mm-hmm. And I know it's a novel, and I don't know how much is true to his life or his experience or his real feelings, but it feels very true. It's hard to read it as a novel and not autobiographical. It's so, whether that is because it so largely is, and because he takes poetic license literally and figuratively, that he calls it a novel, or that he's just incredibly effective at making it feel so real. I don't know.
Well, that was actually one of my questions. You touched on that. It's that he's acknowledged that the novel is mostly autobiographical. And so I wondered if people knew this heading into the novel, and how this knowledge affects your understanding or interpretation of the story.
I didn't know that, and I actually went back a couple times and looked at his bio because it felt so autobiographical to me, and it was hard to believe that it was a novel, but because it felt that way. I mean, it was so believable that this was someone's story, and he's not very old, so he hasn't had that much life. I mean, compared to how many years I've lived, he's young. But I thought that the depth of what he brought to it, he's wise beyond his years. And all that came through and just felt to me very much like an autobiography.
I also felt for a while, I thought, is this a memoir? Because part of it is really to some degree a memoir. And for me, it was a really interesting journey. As a young person, I lived in Hartford for about 8 years and was a news reporter there, visiting a lot of different neighborhoods and talking to a lot of different kinds of people. But it was from an entirely different lens than he presented his. In fact, one of the people that I interviewed.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, we lost Kay.
Okay, you're frozen.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just say that there is this movement for autofic where many writers are doing this sort of thing, Knausgaard and other people, where they're really writing fiction, but they're calling it autofic, autobiography fiction.
Okay.
So that what does that help them do? Because I have nonfiction writer friends and they're limited to, if they're showing their family, they're really limited. They're so afraid, they don't want to hurt their mothers if they're writing about them, but they don't want to tell these stories exactly as they were and have their mothers hurt. So by changing it to fiction, they can get away from that problem somewhat, and they can fictionalize part of it. They can avoid part of telling what happened, and they can then present the novel in a way that they wouldn't be able to if they were writing the memoir, which someone mentioned. And so I see this it's a crossover genre in a way that's kind of popular right now with some writers, not with many, but that's what I see. I just sat in on a panel on trauma fiction, and they were talking about how can we present the trauma in our lives without hurting our family members? Well, one way to do that is to change it into a novel. Right? So I see that he might be avoiding some of what happened to him by doing it as a novel rather than a memoir. That's just a guess. Yeah.
Okay, we lost you for a minute there. Did you want to finish what you were saying? Oh no, we lost her again. Oh gosh. To piggyback on what you're saying, Lee, I also, Kay, we lost you yet again, but I just started to say something. So Lee, you were saying, maybe part of the reason to fictionalize your autobiographical fiction is to spare family members. Another reason I can think of is, so as a writer who's tried to incorporate autobiographical elements into her stories, I know that it doesn't always work. And like, I've written short stories where people have said, oh, that's unrealistic. I'm like, but it actually happened. So like autobiography doesn't always work in written form, it's like, it's not as compelling, or it doesn't fit neatly into a theme, so that might be another reason he picked and chose certain things. Okay, Kay, do you want to try once more?
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know why my connection's so unstable, but I did want to say that as a news reporter living in Hartford, I did interview a refugee family from Laos. They came here right after the Vietnam War. They were Hmong people, and I just remember the sense of extreme dislocation that they had living. They were placed by a congregation in Hartford into a sort of a traditional 3-bedroom house, single family home. And the furniture, they sat on the floor and ate pots of rice. I mean, it was just completely thrown into an entirely different world and environment. And so it was kind of interesting to see this story of the boy who grew up in that kind of circumstances and evolved in, our American culture, which is so different.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned them sitting on the floor because this family also, they sleep on the floor and they all sleep together. And I was wondering if that's a cultural thing, if it's because they feel unsettled and they want to stick together. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think that's how they lived in Vietnam. I've been to Vietnam, and that's how the families live. Like if they're not in the city, more out in the countryside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that this family that I interviewed was also from the countryside, and I don't think they had the kind of furniture we have at all.
If you live in a one-room hut, you sleep together. If you want to sleep indoors.
Yeah, I can concur from personal experience too. You everybody sleeps. Your one room is where you do all of your living, and you eat there, and you study there, and you sleep there, and you pound rice there, and it's all in one spot. Sorry, I'm getting climbed on. I want to say something about this book. I've been trying to figure out the metaphor that made sense for me with this book, and how I think, those little finger things that kids make. They're like they're little box things, and then they put their fingers in and they can flip them out and turn them over, and there's like a message underneath.
Oh yeah, that's
What?
Oh, the fortune tellers. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
That's what this book reminded me of. Because there's all of the pieces there, just like all of the pieces on that fortune teller, but depending on how he flipped it and manipulated it and what flap he lifted up, you got a different answer, or you got a different piece of the story. Even though it was all contained in that one piece, like that one fortune teller. And he would just keep flipping back and forth and coming up with sometimes the same configuration, but lifting a different flap, or coming up with a different configuration, which had a different set of pieces showing at the same time. And it's very much what this book felt like to me, which is not something that I usually see in writing.
I like that metaphor in that image, Jocelyn.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective.
yeah, I agree, Jocelyn. It's very interesting as you were describing that. And I wonder whether that is part of the reason why I really loved the book. Going back to Lee's question as to why I loved the book, I think that the cadence and the rhythm of the storytelling in some way is very familiar to me, that there aren't all these rules about, well, if it's a novel, it should be written this way. If it's an autobiography, it should be written this way. It's a storytelling. And sometimes in the storytelling, certain pieces bring up memories that are not necessarily related in the moment, but do have this sort of connectivity. And so maybe when I look back at my youth and I think about, going home to Burma and visiting family, and I would hear stories and the way they sort of tell the story, I think I'll have to think about that a little bit more. But I certainly, just reading that excerpt just made me feel like, oh my gosh, I can really relate to this. I like the lack of everything was just so picturesque. I could feel it, taste it, smell it, the words, the language that was used. And there wasn't necessarily this expected flow. I know.
It was non-linear, I think is what.
Yes, it's non-linear, right? I guess I'll have to think about it a little bit more, because I just read it in 24 hours. But it is, because Anna said, well, just read an excerpt, Cece, quickly. And I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this whole thing, because it just really spoke to me. And I said, I can understand this language.
I'm writing my own memoir for my family, and it's totally nonlinear. So I can relate to this. So it's as I remember things, and as I'm writing something, then something else comes up. And when I finally put it together, I don't know when that will be, years from now, probably, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be linear. I'm going to keep it sort of this way. So the way that he wrote.
One thing I want to share is about this nonlinear, way of writing. It really challenged me because I was trying to put, I almost started with a piece of paper trying to do a chronological account. Okay, he was 15, tobacco farm, like I was trying to piece it together. And then I said, and it was not working. So I said, okay, no, it's not. So I just kind of let myself, the book pushed me to just go with it. I wanted to make it a different book, and it wasn't working. I do have to admit, though, that there are a couple of things that the one part that I don't know if I missed it or if it's not in the book. I'm curious about high school. It's almost like there's nothing much about high school other than his relationship with Trevor. And also, how did he end up in Brooklyn College? I'm like thinking, I want to know. It's more than, and maybe it wasn't as important to him, right? Because all of a sudden he's just in college and that happened. How did that work out with the family? Coming from the family that he's coming from, going to a different, they all sleep together. Now he's moving to Brooklyn. I would have wanted to know.
Can't remember if there were any details about that. I mean, I finished reading it a week ago, but my memory's so bad, I didn't take notes on that necessarily. I mean, I guess like maybe he didn't think that was important to include because it's not central to who he is, but maybe it, maybe he has another book in the works where he's going to cover that part of his life.
Maybe in some of his poetry.
Yeah.
I mean, has anyone read any of his poetry?
Not yet.
This is the only thing that I've read of his. So it does seem to me that it's an important influence, high school and then college, to get him where he is today. And I just looked again, he lives, well, as of when this was published, he lives in Northampton.
Yeah, he teaches, I think he teaches at UMass Amherst, doesn't he? Or, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Yeah, in the
There's so many
MFA,
schools out there.
I think in the MFA program, or yeah, I'm not sure if he's only undergrad. I'm only grad school or undergrad too.
And he went to Brooklyn College,
Mhm.
the author.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Anna, though, that he doesn't really talk that much about his school days. It's mostly focused on Trevor.
Perhaps because it's to his mother. I'm just wondering. And also, he does talk about being bullied in school. He talks about how he majored in English and it was a worthless degree. Of course, we see it as not worthless, but it was considered to be so.
I take offense at that. I also majored in English.
Yeah, many of us did, right? So.
And I read that he majored in college in 8.
What?
Oh, she stalled again. Tom, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something that, I don't want to get off the track. But one thing about I found the nonlinear good because I skipped around and
Yeah.
I think he did very good. As a continuous thing, it's hard to do nonlinear connect, but each individual story that he told, I thought he did a very good job at those. Some better than others, but all very well. But also the thing that didn't fit is this was a letter to his mother who couldn't read, and that concept, if his mother is going to get this letter, it's going to have to be read to her.
Right. So why did he write it to her? Did he write it knowing because she can't?
And to make it confusing is that she is make it confusing is that it's non-linear. I mean, Sense and Sensibility is an epistolary letter, but but it's more chronological.
Mhm.
You know, the things I also found really interesting was that he wove a lot of different stories, like the monarch butterfly, the Tiger Woods piece. He talked about the exploitation in the nail salons. I mean, there's just so much to ponder about that has to do with his grandmother and his mother's past, but also things that are currently happening in the country. And I think that when I was reading the part about the nail salon, I forget what it was, like 2 or 3 days ago, there's this new machine that's being built that will paint your nails in a grocery store, in the mall, and it'll paint your nails perfectly. You just have to stick your fingers into this computerized machine and it'll paint your nails. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like what is going to happen to all these immigrants that work in the nail salons, right? Just because we can do it, should we be doing it and taking away jobs? And but then someone said to me, FCC, calm down, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a labor move, because now it just means that more people who couldn't afford to go to salons will be able to have their nails done. And I'm like, okay, maybe, I don't know. I don't think so, but it was very interesting. And then I know that whenever I go into the salon and I can smell those chemical nails, I'm like, oh my God. And I worry about the people that work there, and so then it's like, oh my gosh, there's this fact here. And then the subservient part, about the I'm sorry language. Yeah, it gives you a lot to think about in actually a very, very short book. So many powerful messages.
Well, I don't know, Julie, if you are going to ask this question. I can't quite stay till the end because I am recovering from surgery, but I had one question. Can we get the emails of all these wonderful people on this panel? I mean, would people give up their emails so we can be in touch afterwards?
If everybody consents, I can take care of that, Lee.
That would be
everybody okay?
I would love to.
I'm fine with that.
I would love
Okay,
to
I'm okay.
get a hold
I
of.
will make a note of who's here,
problem.
so I'll send that over tomorrow.
That would be terrific. And then I did want to say the title, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, is, I wonder if it's somewhat ironic, given that the darkness in the book that carries through to the very end, because at the very end, and Julie, am I skipping ahead to the end when you are going to be doing that later?
It's non-linearly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had questions. I can actually share my screen because you read my mind. I have
Okay.
the quote where he talks about the title. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where it comes up. Do you want to read that? Does anyone want to read it?
I can't quite see all of it.
Yeah,
So
I can read it.
Okay.
I am thinking of beauty again, how some things are hunted because we have deemed them beautiful. If, relative to the history of our planet, an individual life is so short, a blink of an eye, as they say, then to be gorgeous, even from the day you're born to the day you die, is to be gorgeous only briefly. To be gorgeous, you must first be seen, but to be seen allows you to be hunted.
and there is that last line, allows you to be hunted, right?
Mhm.
So what does gorgeous mean? And I was just going to say that I did really look at the last page because he goes back to his imagery and he's got the butterflies there, which we all attached ourselves to, having seen monarch butterflies perhaps migrate as I have in Maine. But then
And the buffaloes too.
right, but the buffaloes throw themselves over the cliff without thinking, and they're really denigrated in the book. Monkeys and the horrible, the monkeys, moose, cows, dogs, butterflies, buffaloes. What would we give to have the ruined lives of animals tell a human story when our lives are in themselves the story of animals? This is a contradiction to me to this We're Briefly Gorgeous, because this is not a gorgeous collection of, when he pulls his imagery together at the end, this is very dark to me. This is very dark. And it probably needs to be, given his life. So, his past life, not his present life, because he's become ultra famous and so forth. But I'm just wondering if anyone else found that darkness in the book, or Julie, if you were going to comment on that.
I mean, anyone can feel free to answer that. I agree with you. I think there's irony in the title, and and to be gorgeous, you must first be seen, but to be seen allows you to be hunted. So I don't know how that ties in with, I guess, well, it does tie in with animals, of course. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I think it does. And in the acknowledgements at the end, he gives freedom is, he goes back to lines earlier in the beginning of the book. Freedom is nothing but the distance between the hunter and its prey. So there's the aspect of hunt again.
Mm-hmm.
Just the distance you get from someone taking away your freedom.
And adding to that, there's several times that he mentions when his mom will tell him to not draw attention to himself. You're already Vietnamese, right? So in that instance, is he going to be hunted because he's beautiful, or because he's different, right? So it's also the hunting metaphor. It's, to me, it has like a double meaning, because he's going to be, people are picking on him, and he's working so hard to be invisible, even to the point that the teacher forgets about him one time when he's been sent to the corner. So which one is it? Is it you're hunted if you're beautiful, you're hunted if you're different, or is different beautiful? No?
That's really interesting.
So I guess in my mind, I think that basically what he's saying is that so there's the yin and the yang of it, right? Like you can't have one without the other. If you're deemed to be gorgeous, well, somebody has to see you, right? You can't be gorgeous. I guess you can be, but if you're outwardly motivated and you feel the need to be seen as gorgeous, then you have to have other people see you, right? So if other people see you as gorgeous, well, just the reality of life is that there will be people who will want to destroy you because you're gorgeous, right? So I think that it's just in that moment, right? It has to be both of those things happen at the same time. Hopefully you don't get hunted, but more than likely you could be. So drawing attention to yourself and for people to notice you. And so the only time that you have that freedom, as Thomas said, is that gap before you get caught, and while you're gorgeous, is the only time that you are free. I think it makes sense. I think it's just a realistic analogy.
Lee, to your point, I started, I just found the book almost unbearably sad. I don't know how you folks read it in like one sitting or one day. I had to read it in small increments.
Yeah.
I talked about that a little bit, Lee, before you joined, about the sadness.
Yeah. It's hard to bear at times.
Yep.
But it's what he went through, as we're all saying, because there is this autobiographical part to this book. So, and we haven't gotten to, what he suffered for being gay. Now here he might have had an easier time of that than he would have in Vietnam.
No, that was here. That was in Hartford.
Right. So he would have had an easier time, but still difficult, right, in this time period.
Yeah, I think culturally it was a concern.
Well, it's interesting that when he tells his mother that he's gay, her reaction is, "Are you going to start wearing dresses now?" And he says, "Oh, no, of course not." But then he admits admits to the reader that he has worn her dresses. I thought that was pretty funny. I like, there were moments of levity like that helped me get through it.
Yeah.
But I think why one of the reasons that this book was so sad to me was what seemed like his own struggles with his sexuality and his not accepting of who he was, and Trevor not accepting of who Trevor was. And a lot of times when I read books about adversity, there's just a little different flavor in terms of people struggling, but a little bit, but more okay with who they are than he seemed to be. And that was one of the elements that I thought was heartbreaking. And that's why I was happy to see that video where he didn't look despondent. So
I got the sense that Little Dog was okay with who he accepted who he was, and he was only nervous about being found out because of what further bullying he might go through or what his mother would say. But Trevor was the one who wasn't okay with who he was. And he kept saying, oh, this doesn't mean I'm gay, does it?
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. I felt, wasn't there even a line, maybe I'm misremembering, where Little Dog says something along the lines of, he had so many strikes against him already, like being gay was the least of them.
And
I think so.
There was I looked at a couple of other videos, and there's a video that when we upload this recording, I'll put a couple of videos in description in the YouTube page, where he goes to Christiana Mampour's show, and he has an interview. It's about 15 minutes, and he actually talks about his sexuality, and he said that he felt that Trevor had the shortest end of the whole deal because Trevor had to respond to the rigid masculinity roles that are imposed in the United States. He felt that in his culture in Vietnam, there's more fluidity, which I was not aware of it, but that's all he said. So that he felt not as constricted. He still realized, oh, what am I going to do about this? Started to explore his what he was feeling, what he was discovering, but he didn't feel that pressure. As he said, Trevor was the one that felt, in his view, was more had the issue, and because of the addiction that he suffered, it was a way to kind of pacify that concern.
Yeah, I have to agree. And also that he came out to his mother when he was 17, which I thought was very indicative of how he felt that he would be more likely, received in a warmer way. And also he talked about how in Vietnam, right, at the different sort of funerals, right, with that they have the I think they did called trans performers, right? And also in Burma, where I'm originally from, we have a lot of people who dress as women and come and sing songs and to your house, and it's something that's very, very accepted. So that sort of fluidity is it's out in the open. I mean, it's not like there are these special clubs that you have to go to. People are out and about. So I did feel that Trevor was the one who had and didn't have that familial support, which Little Dog felt. And he was uncertain, certainly, but I think almost everybody is uncertain. But he came out when he was 17, which is pretty young.
I am going to have to adjourn because I'm in a bit of pain, but I wanted to say that it's been absolute delight to meet such perceptive people. I had no idea, and I hope so much I can get your emails and stay in touch. It would be wonderful. So thank you very much, Julie, for a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank
Feel
you,
better
Lee.
soon.
Healing,
Thank you,
Take
Lee.
care.
Take care.
speedy healing, and join us again.
Thank you.
Yes.
One thing that I noticed, I don't know if you talked about before I got here, but this is being developed as a film,
Oh, I didn't know that.
feature film, and it's been in development for a while, but there's no, the latest things say there's no cast chosen, and, but it's going to be supposedly a feature film. And I wonder
You
how they're
know,
gonna,
he's
I
involved.
wonder how they're gonna do that.
I was gonna say. it could
They're gonna
totally-
have to change it. It's gonna have to be more linear.
First of all,
Yeah, much
No,
less poetic.
Yes.
One of the, yeah, much so. And, well, yes, because of the, but the, unless they, well, it could be, yeah, less poetic, but also, is it gonna be, it's gonna be very confusing to get all this in a 2-hour film.
Yes.
Because one of the
Good
things
point.
was, it's gonna be one of the things in the question and answer about the, making it into a live thing. Is it gonna be a series or a film? And I think it'll lead itself much better to a series, even if it's non-linear,
Mhm.
than it would be a film,
Yeah.
feature film.
Did you read if he's involved in it, or if he just sold it and someone else will be like writing the book for it?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see what it says here. It was announced in 2020 in a podcast.
I'm just
Hmm.
curious.
Yeah.
It just seems so autobiographical that how could you let someone else take the story and mess
Yeah.
it up?
I would
I
hope there would be.
wonder,
Not just autobiographical, but the way in which it's told doesn't really.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't lend itself. No, but I'm just saying if he
Yeah.
weren't involved in it, it just,
I would hope that there would be a lot of voiceovers with passages from the story.
I think it's a story where the cinematography, if it does get made into a movie, the
I think he is going to be involved.
cinematography is essential.
I think because it says here, the episode of the podcast, which announced it, the episode featured a one-on-one conversation between Vuong, poet and author, who won the MacArthur grant, and Brian. Okay, yeah. And so it says that they're going to. It's funny, he was in the same podcast with Brian Washington, and they were talking about his film being made into a movie, a TV series.
I think when the film comes out, we need to watch it and reconvene this group.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Watch it.
I always worry when movies or TV shows are made of books that I enjoyed because
One of my other book groups just read a book that I read in 2006 when it came out, The Tender Bar,
Yeah.
Mm,
and that was just made into
Mhm.
a feature film too, and that was one which has a lot in it, and it's also non-linear in some of it, and it's, back and forth. And in the movie, they had 3 different characters playing three different actors playing the main characters in different stages of life.
mhm.
And so, but people who read the book thought that the book was a lot better and it contained more than a Ben Affleck feature film.
That's often the case.
I don't usually like to watch movies when I've read a book that I've loved because I
Yeah.
have my own idea of how things look
Mhm.
based on the book, and I don't want somebody from Hollywood telling me the way it should look.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You almost have to look at it as a completely
There are some
different
movies
thing.
that cover the book very
Yes.
well. To Kill Mockingbird is a great book, and the I think who was it, Horton Foote or somebody, whoever did the screenplay for it, kept a lot of the dialogue. Like the court scene is identical in the book as it is to the other one. But one thing is seeing Boo Radley. Oh, that wasn't what I thought Boo Radley would look like.
It wasn't Robert Duvall.
Yes, it was. It was. In the book, I didn't think of Robert Duvall. Then again, when I saw the movie the first time, no one knew who Robert Duvall was.
Right. Sure. But the movie is often an entirely different art form, so you have to kind of see it that way, I think.
Mhm.
Julie, we are at the 10-minute mark. How would you like us to?
Well, I didn't have a whole lot of questions because I knew the questions I did have would spark a lot of discussion. But one thing I was thinking of ending with, if people would like to, if you have a favorite line or passage or anything that really struck you that you'd like to read aloud. It's not required, but just wondered if anyone would like to do that.
I don't have the book, so.
I
Okay,
don't either. I don't know.
all right.
Give you one.
You're trying to give it.
Mine's longer. Mine's large print,
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. I should have.
I didn't mark anything, so.
That's okay.
I appreciate the ones that you shared with us, Julie.
Yes,
Oh,
thank
good.
you.
You're
And I
welcome.
can't read because I'll probably drop.
Oh, your voice
Mine's
dropped off.
mine's a library book, so I can't. not
Yeah.
read it.
So is mine.
Is Jay still listening? I probably.
Mine too.
I had a book. Another book group last night, the library book group, and in it, the book that I got from the Natick Library had a little post-it note inside, and it said, "Don't mark in our book. Use this piece of paper instead." That was a
Cece,
good-
did you find a quote?
So I found this part. So it's anyway, I'll just read it. It's
Okay.
through the drag performers' explosive outfits and gestures, their overdrawn faces and voices, their taboo trespass of gender, that this relief through extravagant spectacle is manifest. As much as they are useful, paid and empowered as a vital service in a society where to be queer is still a sin, the drag queens are, for as long as their dead lie in the open, an othered performance. Their presumed reliable fraudulence is what makes their presence to the mourners necessary, because grief at its worst is unreal, and it calls for a surreal response. The queens in this way are unicorns stamping in a graveyard.
That's a
One
good
of my
quote.
favorite. Yeah, that's one of my favorite too. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it's a really good quote to end on, because as I was reading, when I, like you said, Anna, I think you started out like trying to come up with the chronology, and so I sort of was trying to do that, and then I just sort of let myself go, and I realized this is really how the mind works. You know, those moments before you fall asleep and your mind is just wandering. You might remember something that happened that day, something that happened 20 years ago, and so on. So I think he really captured the way the mind works really well.
Mhm. And going back to the title, I think it's I think it's a nod that each of us at least once in our life hope to be seen.
Yeah.
I think for me, the one paragraph that Cece read, and also the whole scene of the sorry in the nail salon, that was very visceral. It just felt really, my dad was a doorman in New York City, so come from tips, the whole culture of tips and being subservient. It really spoke to me. So that was another passage that to me was really very jarring. But the question that, aside from the Brooklyn College high school scenes, the question that it still remains for me is the whole issue of PTSD for the grandmother, right? That was not addressed. And I wonder now, his mother is living. And there is, I'm sure, remnants of, as I think it was Jocelyn who mentioned intergenerational trauma. Then, and this has nothing to do with the book, it's more real life. How is that being addressed? Are they aware? Have they made peace of it because of the cultural lens, and how it might be affecting him? Right. So that is a huge question. Maybe he's dealing with it through his poetry, maybe other books that he's written. So I'm just curious because that's there. It was presented, but it was never the main focus, right? But it's very real.
It's an element of his life that coexists with other elements of his life. And I think you're right. He's processing it through his writing.
Yeah.
I think that as I was reading this and thinking about the trauma of war and thinking about what's going on in the Ukraine and the millions of people that are traumatized and what that is going to do for them in future generations. And then it was even interesting watching that clip and talking about toxic masculinity and thinking about Will Smith at the Oscars. It's so the issues he raises are so pervasive, sadly so, right? And growing issues as opposed to diminishing issues today.
One of the things that I wanted to mention is that when you go to Vietnam, it's not called the Vietnam War, it's called the American War. Which is a kind of jarring because we grew up with it being the Vietnam War, but I felt all this PTSD through the book. But what was amazing to me when I was in Vietnam was how forgiving the people were of Americans and how kind they were. I wasn't sure how we would be received, but so forgiving, so much more than I think we as Americans would have been if the tables were turned.
Yeah, we're a pretty self-centered society in general.
Yeah, definitely. I want to thank you for, I don't know who selected this book, but it was really wonderful to be able to read it, and having this conversation just enhanced my appreciation of the book. I learned a lot from all of you, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming.
Likewise.
I agree. Thank you.
We have a little plug. You'll receive it in a few weeks for the May selection, which is Joy Harjo, a poem warrior. I believe it's a memoir. That's the title of the book. So we are going to be reading that in May, the end of May. So you'll get the flyer and the invitation shortly. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, you're
Any last
welcome.
words?
If another trustee joined us, we would have couldn't talk about library stuff.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, Tom is a trustee, a library trustee as well. So
Yes, that's right. One more, we would have had trouble.
yeah, no more.
No, a
Thanks,
quorum.
everyone. That's right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
Great to have you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.